attributing like proper family values.
Is bro wearing a upside down cross? If you had asked me prior to this, there were going to be 10 men on this panel, one of them was going to be non-binary, which of them was going to wear the upside down cross? I may have made a couple dollars. All right, I'll just say that. All right, everyone, let's watch this Vice panel on masculinity and see what happens.
Obviously,
Yeah, some gender roles are needless and completely socially constructed, like the color pink, girls like pink and guys like blue. Like, that's, of course, arbitrary, and no one should be held back by that. But there are some roles that are clearly related to the biological reality of sex, like a lot of manual labor is done by men. Obviously, because those jobs require a lot of physical strength, which those people who are most physically capable are all men. And a lot of jobs having to do with childcare and social work are done by women, because women, on average, have personality traits that correlate with success in those fields. And that's indisputable. And this is called being so smart you're capable of rationalizing stupid ideas. Two-parent households are objectively the best family structure for raising children. Oh, but we can raise children in a community like a commune. Yeah, that works great, except if you're special needs, because all of those communities where no parents take responsibility for each individual child, the kids who are on the margins get left behind because, oh, well, there's all these other kids we could take care of, and no special attention is paid to those kids. So, silly, in my opinion. Between these two, the cowboy guy and the non-binary person, I in this instance, I happen to agree with the cowboy guy a little bit more, but not really. But it's interesting because they're both just articulating the tenets of their ideology. Well, I mean, you can do that, but it seems they're both offering overly simplistic, predictable explanation that guy is trying to make. The wage gap and Roe v. Wade, men trying to control women's bodies. Like, well, all of the pro-life women that you just dismissed would have a different opinion. The wage gap, statistically, when you break it down, not due to discrimination. It's due to women making different choices, which is not discrimination. Could be socially constructed, that the fact that women make different choices, but that's not discrimination. There is no we here. There's, 4 billion men? We? I have nothing in common with the uber wealthy sons of real estate moguls, and I have nothing in common with the people who are mining cobalt out of the mines in Africa to build our iPhones. It's like, this collectivist nonsense. It's a way to play victim when you want and then not have to take responsibility when you want, and it's bad. They were talking about dating, and then it was, well, historically, they used to rape villages and take their gold and shit, and then he brings it back to the conversation. It's like, oh yeah, that is kind of a ridiculous entire way to think about things. Well, historically this happened. It's like, we're talking about dating norms, good sir. This is a Wendy's. It's like, if you're a guy and you've never walked in a bad neighborhood, okay, that's evidence of your privilege in the actual term, that you've never been put in a position where you could get mugged or killed or something like that. But it's like, I do not want to be walking through a dangerous neighborhood at night when there's just, suspicious people across the street or something. And it's like, I just don't buy this argument that it's only women who feel fear at night walking in like a dangerous neighborhood. It's like, right, you should walk through some of the dangerous neighborhoods I've luckily only had to walk through. I don't know about logical reasoning. I don't think there's any psychometric data about logical reasoning in men and women. I don't think logic and reasoning are valid constructs. But there are biological differences. Women are higher in their sensitivity to negative emotion on average, which means with literally millions of exceptions. Just like on average, men are taller than women. That doesn't mean that. The last 5 years during the pandemic or so was having regular, open, honest conversations with my friends who I wouldn't normally have, and I wouldn't just come out of the blue with some emotional conversation, but I did that, and then it caused our friendships to be closer, and now I have a valuable asset, someone I can run ideas by, and someone who I keep up to date on my issues. So, and I do the same for them, so we're constantly strategizing and all that stuff, and having a release and having fun and stuff. So, yeah, definitely maintain those friendships.
There's something holding people
Easier said than done.
back.
Yeah,
holding men
and
back.
I think it's us.
phrase. Oh my God. All right, everyone. Well, that was interesting. Until next time, good luck and Godspeed.